Perhaps the world's biggest serial killer would never have been caught if he knew how to use a computer. Imagine someone committing serial killings, who not only befriends his victims, but is also a well-known figure in the city, and on top of that, a doctor. This is the astonishing story of Dr. Harold Shipman, who didn't use his clinic to save lives, but to take them. In the small town of Hyde, England, with a population of only 30 people, Dr. Shipman carried out serial killings under everyone's nose for 23 years. Even after putting more than 250 people to eternal sleep, no one suspected him. And perhaps no one ever would have if he hadn't made one small mistake. What was the reason behind these murders? Why wasn't he caught for so long? And what clue did the police find that exposed years of killings in an instant? Dr. Harold Shipman mainly targeted patients who lived alone and were quite elderly, so their deaths wouldn't raise any suspicion. He gave them extra time, visiting their homes, listening to their problems to lighten their hearts, and making them feel that even though they were alone, Dr. Shipman was there to hear them out. Some patients trusted him so much that they even gave him the keys to their houses. Because of this approach, he became quite popular in Hyde, as people believed he treated the elderly with care. But behind this facade, Dr. Shipman was figuring out when his patients would be alone, how much wealth they had, who visited them, and where their relatives lived. When he was satisfied, he would give his patients an overdose of medicine and kill them. Since the patients were already over 80, their deaths raised no suspicion. This went on for many years, and not only was he never caught, but no one even suspected him. That is, until he made a mistake. Dr. Shipman began his career in a town called Pontefract, 70 kilometers from Hyde, where he worked at a hospital. In 1974, he left Pontefract and moved to Todmorden, where he got a position as a general practitioner at Abraham Ormerod Medical Center. During his job, he would prescribe some patients excessive quantities of pethidine. Pethidine is actually a painkiller, but is also a highly addictive drug. Dr. Shipman was addicted to pethidine and would deliberately prescribe it to his patients, even when they didn't need it. After taking the medicine, the patients would feel very good, but in reality, they had no idea they were getting addicted. This was the reason Dr. Shipman's patients, even unwillingly, became attracted to him. After being caught, the hospital administration fired Dr. Shipman, and the issue escalated to the possibility of his medical license being canceled. However, his license was spared. After spending some time in a rehabilitation center, when everyone had forgotten about him, he returned to Hyde in 1977 and joined Donnybrook Medical Center as a general practitioner. In 1980, he continued practicing as a GP, and during this time, he neither gave up his addiction nor missed any opportunity to murder elderly patients. The frequency of these murders increased significantly in 1993, when he opened his own clinic in Hyde and gained a good reputation in the town. For several years, this continued without anyone suspecting his actions. It wasn't until March 1998 that Dr. Linda Reynolds, who worked at Brooke Surgery Hospital right across from Shipman's clinic, expressed concern about the unusually high death rate among his patients. She pointed out that in the past 3 months, 16 of Shipman's patients had died, whereas during the same period, Brooke Surgery, with 3 times more patients than Shipman's clinic, had only 14 deaths. Suspicion deepened when it was discovered that all 16 of Dr. Shipman's deceased patients had been cremated rather than buried. It's worth noting that most Christians prefer to bury their loved ones after death, with only a few opting for cremation. Dr. Linda reported her concerns in the form of a detailed report to the Manchester coroner, including the fact that the majority of Shipman's 16 deceased patients were elderly women. A patient was found dead in her own home, and it couldn't always be a coincidence that most of these patients died when Dr. Shipman was either at their house or was the first to discover the body. What made it even more suspicious was that many of Shipman's patients were found dead in strange circumstances, sitting upright in their chairs, well-dressed, which was far from normal. Despite this, when an investigation was launched based on these suspicions, the police couldn't find any solid evidence against Dr. Shipman, and the investigation was closed after a month. When Dr. Harold Shipman's patients died, he would personally sign Form B, the form that a treating doctor must sign to state the cause of death. However, the problem was with Form C, which required a second doctor's signature. In most cases, Shipman had his friends or doctors who trusted him sign Form C, making them unaware of any wrongdoings. By manipulating these death certificates and providing false information, Shipman was able to send his patients' bodies for cremation without raising any suspicions. As a result, many deaths went uninvestigated, allowing him to continue his killing spree undetected for years. Even after the initial investigation was closed, Shipman claimed 3 more victims, but his time was running out. His final victim was Kathleen Grundy, the former mayor of Hyde, who was 81 years old when she was found dead in her home on June 24, 1998. Dr. Shipman was the last person to see her alive and later signed her death certificate, attributing her death to old age. Kathleen's daughter, Angela Woodruff, a lawyer herself, grew suspicious of her mother's mysterious death when she discovered a will that left her mother's house to Dr. Shipman. The fact that Shipman was close to the family wasn't enough to raise doubts, but Angela's suspicion deepened when she realized her mother had 2 houses, and the will only mentioned 1. This suggested that the will had been forged by someone unaware of the second property, and that person was Dr. Shipman. Angela took her concerns to the police, prompting a fresh investigation into the doctor. The investigation began, and Kathleen Grundy's body was exhumed for an autopsy. It was discovered that her body contained high traces of diamorphine, commonly known as heroin. When the police questioned Dr. Shipman, he claimed that Grundy was addicted to heroin and had noted this in her medical records before her treatment. Dr. Shipman had recently begun using computerized medical journals. But what he didn't realize was that although he entered a backdated note about her drug use, the computer automatically saved the file's last edited date. Upon checking the entries, the police found evidence linking him to the crime. Not only was this enough to arrest Shipman, but the police also found the typewriter used to forge Grundy's will. They made this connection because some characters on Shipman's typewriter were faulty, and those same characters were missing from Grundy's forged will. On September 7, 1998, the police arrested the well-known doctor, Harold Shipman, from Hyde. When the news broke, other families who had lost loved ones to Shipman's care came forward. They had suspected something was wrong, but had been too afraid to speak up against such a prominent figure in the community. The police investigated 15 other patients who had recently died under Shipman's care. In each case, a clear pattern emerged. Shipman would administer a lethal dose of diamorphine, sign the death certificate himself, and list old age as the cause of death. He would also suggest cremation, ensuring that any remaining evidence would be destroyed. During the Shipman inquiry, all the cases under his care were re-examined. The investigation team looked into death certificates, medical records, and even interviewed the families of the victims. In some cases, bodies were exhumed for forensic post-mortems. This detailed process revealed that Shipman had murdered a confirmed total of 218 patients between 1975 and his arrest. However, due to a lack of evidence in some cases, the true number could not be confirmed and is estimated to be as high as 260. The court found him guilty of 15 murders, and in January 2000, Shipman was sentenced to life imprisonment. However, he took his own life in prison by tying bed sheets to the bars of his cell. After his death, a fellow inmate made a shocking claim that Shipman had confessed to killing 508 people. Though this has never been confirmed, the true motive behind Shipman's killings remains unclear. Some believe he was a psychopath. Others suggest it was a way for him to make money, and some even point to the impact of his mother's death. Shipman's mother, who had cancer, was administered morphine as a painkiller. Experts speculate that perhaps the Shipman wanted to recreate the experience of watching someone die under morphine, as he did with his own patients. We hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to like and share. Thank you so much for your supportive comments, and we'll see you in the next incredible video.